You guys are flawless.
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 That's the first word that comes to mind when I think about us.
It's perfect and neat.
I wrote a book with flawless in the name.
Really? You're an author?
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, he's a terrific.
And people say, why did you name it Flawless? And I remember the moment, and I didn't want to call it. And they said, well, Peter, you have to make a decision. You want to sell the book or not? And he said, if you want to sell the book, you need a title that people will reach for.
So is that the whole title, just that
Flawless
word?
Consultant. And so I thought for probably about a second, I said, I want to sell the book.
Toyota's not coming to town.
Yeah.
And you talk about narratives, like how do we flip the script, as the kids say, and how do we learn to become human again? I mean, you talk a lot about this community thing. What is community? How do you transform community? Why is that important to becoming human? And
see, I think that we've always sold religion on becoming human. And so I wouldn't hold on to that sentence. I think we want to restore our humanity. And so I would say, well, how are you going to make a living? Well, what does community have to offer? Well, I'm going to have to figure I'm going to make a living in walking distance. So what am I good at? What can I do? What can I make? So I look around this neighborhood and I say, well, how are we going to get by? Well, some people are going to grow vegetables and they're going to have more than they need. I got a neighbor that helps fix my house when I don't know how to do that. So I think our interdependence, our connection with each other is how we're going to sustain ourselves. So the sustainability movement isn't about the greenness, it's about how am I going to have a shelter. And Walter told me what the wilderness was about. So
it's about solving problems in community? Is that what
you're
saying?
Community
Finding the problem in community and then solving it?
Well, community is the only way that the problem of how to raise a child, how to be safe, how to eat is going to get solved. And this is why the narrative of the Old Testament.
That's right. And when you say how are we going to eat, then it obviously beneath that is the question about who gets to eat and who gets to decide who gets to eat. Mm. There's this amazing story about Paulo Freire, the Latin American educator, and he wrote a reader for peasants who couldn't read, and it was Dick and Jane, and they couldn't learn to read. Then he rewrote it, and the sentences were, see the well, who owns the well, who gets to use the water, so on. They learned to read in 2 weeks. Because it was about the kinds of needs and requirements that Peter's talking about.
Yeah, so it is a redistribution of not who owns the well but who owns the narrative.
That's right. That's right. The narrative about the well.
Yeah. And so we've bought the notion that the well needs management. So in healthcare, how am I going to stay healthcare? If you look at all the Commonwealth Foundation now is documenting innovations in healthcare. And they issue reports about all the exciting things that are happening. They're going to transform healthcare. They're all management strategies. They have two dimensions: better management, better technology, and better incentives. So they're naming the conversation about what keeps me healthy in a way that keeps me sick.
Yep, that's right.
Because better management is not healing. So the alternative narrative is Paul Ehrlich is a thoracic surgeon.
He's what?
He's a thoracic surgeon. So he can cut and sew and makes a lot of money from it. That's what he does. And he says he's not talking anymore of health. He's talking about healing. So I think if somebody at the top of the food chain realizes that his skill is not the point, and he says, for me to not get repeat customers, so he does heart surgery.
Yep.
I know the community is the only way to keep them healthy,
yep.
and so I'm interested in healing.
Yep.
So who controls the narrative is the big question, and that's
right.
why your insights about the
Yep.
Old Testament is you're reconstructing who's speaking counts.
So the crisis for that surgeon is what kind of a medical operation is he answerable to that requires him to produce more? And
that's what he's redoing.
Yep. Yep.
He came to the University of Cincinnati because he's invented something called collaborative rounds. And so he says that if you got somebody in the hospital, and if you get everybody related to that, the care of that inner circle, the lab people, of course the nurses and physicians, and the family of the patient, and the family, and get them in a conversation that takes 15 minutes about what's in the best interest of this person. He said all measures of well-being get better.
So the guy is situated, the guy or the patient in a neighborhood.
He's in a neighborhood.
It's a neighborhood.
You create a neighborhood
Yeah.
around a patient in the hospital, the satisfaction goes up, accidents go down, tenure goes down, costs go down. So this is pretty appealing. But every place he goes, he only lasts a year or two, because when they find out that he means it, they say, Paul, this isn't quite what we had in mind.
Don't profits go down, though?
Huh?
Don't profits go down?
Well, see, I wouldn't ask that question. That's the cynical question. Do profits go down? Huh? No, I don't care. I don't mind if they make money. Hospitals have no problem with profits. Otherwise, they wouldn't be replacing neighborhoods with garages. Anybody that's building a garage is doing well. You know, we have a 2-car garage. Okay. The guy up the street's got 7-car garage. I figure that's the new measure of wealth, is how many garages you got. Well, the biggest construction of garages in communities now are hospitals.
The parking facilities.
Parking, yeah. 7-car parking, so that like more and more people come in.
Yep.
So they're doing good. 20% of the economy, no tears for hospitals. And I think it's more the habit, more the narrative and construction that Walter talks about is why they get rid of Paul. So Paul's in Wichita now, where he grew up, and he does enough of his work to sustain himself, and he's forced now to create his own infrastructure, his own world, because no institution can hold him. No institution can hold the methodology called collaborative. Now, people in the middle love it, and this is what's true about it. It's the management thinking knows that collaboration is costly. So the idea that better management is going to give us better service is the illusion that you're exploiting.
That's right.
And so when Walter says that Elijah, the uncredentialed, I just love that. The uncredentialed leader has the capacity to heal and to bring peace and to rise, lifting from the dead, which we are. Part of the privatization is to anesthetize.
Yep.
So
that's right. I did a speaking of Elisha, I did a sermon on 2 Kings 5, which is Elisha healing the Syrian leper general who had leprosy. And what we tend to do with that narrative is we read down to the healing and then we stop. But the interesting part of the narrative is what happens after that, because when he's healed, the general says to Elisha, well, I need to pay you. What should I pay you for that? And he says, never mind. And then Elisha has this associate named Gehazi who runs after him and puts the hit on him to say, you ought to contribute to our medical operation. So the healed guy and Gehazi have a business model of health that it's got to be an economic transaction. The only one that doesn't participate in that is Elisha, who is the healer, says, I'm not participating in that economic transaction. So it's too bad we focus on the wrong part. I think the wrong part of the narrative for where we are in our society.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's middle management was the problem.
That's right. That's right.
That's why leadership is such a faulty construct.
That's right.
Well, then the harm comes back to...
That's right. He ends up with leprosy.
Yeah, because of getting into this transactional relationship. Yeah.
So what made him sick again was he commodified
That's right.
healing.
That's right. That's exactly
or
right.
grace. So I assume
Yep.
one of the tools Elijah uses is grace.
Indeed.
The action of God.
That's right.
And so God got commodified as if this relationship between Elijah and the Syrian general, which is fascinating.
It is.
We
It
have
is.
a lot of thoughts about the Syrian general
That's right.
today.
That's right.
What was healing there was existence of God,
Yep.
or grace, or love, whatever language you want to use.
That's right.
And then as soon as you commodify that,
Yep.
the disease reappears.
Yep.